There comes a moment in every narcissist's life when the mirror no longer lies. The charm that once captivated everyone begins to fade. The attention they once commanded starts to scatter, and the control they so desperately crave begins to slip through their fingers. Age has a way of stripping away the illusions people hide behind, and for a narcissist, that truth is unbearable. What once fed their ego, beauty, admiration, influence, power, now begins to vanish, leaving behind a gnawing emptiness they can no longer silence with validation. It is in these later years that their jealousy takes on strange, almost haunting forms, revealing just how fragile their sense of self has always been. When a narcissist ages, the world they built around themselves begins to crumble. The people who once adored them grow wiser, more distant, more aware. They see through the manipulation, the guilt, the endless games of superiority. And for the narcissist, that realization ignites an envy that runs deep, not just toward others, but toward the youth, peace, and authenticity they never truly possessed. They envy those who still have time to love sincerely, to build honestly, to heal what they destroyed. This speech is not about hating them. It's about understanding the patterns, so you can free yourself from their shadow. Because when you see the strange jealousies that surface as they grow older, you begin to recognize that their envy was never about you. It was about what they lacked within themselves. The goal is not to pity or to fight them. It's to reclaim your peace, your confidence, your emotional clarity. You see, aging humbles everyone, but for a narcissist, it exposes everything. The mask begins to crack, the performance loses its audience, and the spotlight fades. What's left is a person terrified of irrelevance, haunted by their own emptiness. And while they spiral in jealousy, you are invited to rise above it, to grow, to heal, and to finally live in truth, not illusion. There comes a point in a narcissist's life when the applause begins to fade, when the audience they worked so hard to control no longer responds to their performance. The spotlight they once demanded dims, not because the world is cruel, but because truth has a way of catching up. When the narcissist can no longer steal the stage, what's left is silence, an echo of all the illusions they built, all the people they manipulated, and all the admiration they stole to fill their emptiness. And that silence terrifies them more than anything. For years, the narcissist survives by performing. Every gesture, every compliment, every act of love is designed to draw attention, to keep the world revolving around them. They crave the validation of being seen, admired, and envied. But as time passes, people begin to see through the act. They notice the cracks, the exhaustion behind the charm, the insecurity hiding beneath the confidence. And the narcissist feels that shift like a wound. They can sense when they're no longer the center of someone's universe. When the people around them stop feeding their ego and start protecting their peace. When the spotlight fades, the narcissist doesn't just lose attention, they lose identity. Their entire sense of worth has always depended on external admiration. Without that, they begin to unravel. They grow bitter, restless, and desperate to reclaim the stage. You'll see them create drama, stir conflict, or reinvent themselves in ways that scream, "Look at me again." But what they don't understand is that the energy they once used to control others now turns inward, eating away at their sanity. Because attention was never love, and applause was never belonging. For those who have lived under their shadow, watching this unraveling can feel both confusing and freeing. You might remember the days when their presence filled every room, when your needs were drowned out by their demands. But now, the silence speaks louder. The narcissist's inability to dominate, to manipulate, to command admiration reveals something deeper. The truth that their power was never real. It was borrowed from those they deceived, from those who gave their energy away out of love, fear, or hope. This is where you must rise. Because as the narcissist stage collapses, yours begins to form. When their voice quiets, your inner voice becomes clearer. You start to see how much of your light was dimmed just to make them shine. You realize that the attention they stole from others was only temporary, but the strength you're building now is eternal. Their fading spotlight is not your loss. It's your liberation. It's the beginning of reclaiming your energy, your boundaries, your purpose. When the narcissist can no longer steal the stage, they are forced to face themselves. And for many, that's a mirror they've avoided their entire lives. Without the validation of others, they're left to confront the emptiness they've hidden behind arrogance. It's a painful reckoning, one they often mask with anger, denial, or projection. But for those who have broken free, this moment represents divine justice. The truth no longer hides. The world begins to see them for who they truly are, and you begin to see yourself for who you were always meant to be. So, don't grieve the end of their performance. Don't feel pity when their power fades or their audience walks away. Understand that this is the natural order of things. Light cannot stay dimmed forever. The false must fall so that the authentic can rise. You no longer need to live reacting to their chaos or proving your worth in their presence. Instead, you can breathe, rebuild, and stand in your own truth. Because when the narcissist's spotlight fades, the stage is no longer theirs to own. It belongs to you now, the one who survived the manipulation, the control, the pain. It belongs to your healing, your peace, and your voice. You were never meant to live as part of someone else's act. You were meant to shine in your own light, freely and without fear. And that moment begins the very instant you realize you don't need an audience. You only need authenticity, courage, and the quiet confidence that comes from knowing who you truly are. There comes a time in the narcissist's life when the mirror, their oldest ally, becomes their greatest enemy. The reflection that once gave them power, that once validated their charm, begins to betray them. Where once they saw control, they now see loss. Where once they admired the beauty they used to manipulate others, they now see the lines of time they cannot erase. And it is here, in the quiet war between illusion and reality, that envy begins to grow like a shadow that never leaves. For the narcissist, youth is more than age, it is identity. They equate beauty, desirability, and vitality with control. Their sense of worth has always been tied to how others see them, and as the years take their toll, they start to lose the influence that once came so easily. They see the younger faces rising, the admiration shifting elsewhere, and their once glowing confidence begins to dim under the weight of insecurity. Time is something they cannot charm, manipulate, or deceive, and that realization cuts deep. The mirror that used to reflect perfection now reflects truth. And truth is something the narcissist cannot bear. As beauty fades, they begin to lash out, not just at others, but at themselves. You'll see it in their criticism of youth, in their desperate attempts to stay relevant, in their bitterness toward those who still carry that spark of innocence and possibility. Their envy of youth isn't about vanity alone. It's about losing access to power. The attention that once kept them alive now belongs to someone else, and that loss is unbearable. They begin to resent the very qualities they once flaunted, mocking beauty and vitality in others, while secretly mourning their own. But the tragedy of this stage is that they had a choice. Instead of growing wiser, softer, and more self-aware with age, they clung to their false identity. They refused to evolve. They resisted humility, compassion, and depth, the very qualities that could have made them beautiful beyond appearance. Now, as time strips away the mask, they're left with nothing to hold on to but regret. And because they cannot face that truth, they turn their pain outward, projecting envy, judgment, and hostility toward those who remind them of what they've lost. If you've ever been close to a narcissist aging into this phase, you'll recognize it in the subtle ways they try to steal your light. They'll criticize your joy, downplay your achievements, or make you feel guilty for having what they no longer possess. They'll dress envy as wisdom, manipulation as care, and control as concern. But beneath it all lies fear, the fear of becoming invisible, irrelevant, and forgotten. They see you as the living proof of time's passing, and rather than embracing grace, they choose comparison. Yet for you, the one who has endured their envy, their projections, their coldness, this is not a moment of pity. It's a moment of awakening. You begin to understand that their hostility was never about you. It was about their own unresolved grief, their refusal to accept that real worth is internal, not external. You see that what they call loss is actually the natural evolution of life, something that could have been beautiful if met with acceptance instead of fear. The mirror turning cold is a symbolic moment, not just for them, but for you. It reminds you of the importance of nurturing your inner self, of investing in character, peace, and purpose rather than appearance or control. While the narcissist obsesses over fading youth, you learn to value growth. While they envy time slipping away, you learn to cherish it. You begin to realize that beauty without humility is fleeting, but humility with self-awareness is eternal. This is where true transformation happens. You no longer see time as an enemy. You no longer chase validation in the eyes of others. You learn to look in the mirror and see not perfection, but truth. And that truth becomes your strength. You begin to heal the parts of yourself that the narcissist tried to make you doubt. You reclaim your reflection, your worth, and your right to love yourself without needing anyone else's permission. And as you heal, you start to recognize the difference between aging and evolving. Aging happens to everyone, but evolution is a choice. The narcissist resists change, clings to the illusion of eternal youth, and loses everything in the process. You, on the other hand, embrace the lessons of time, allowing wisdom to refine your soul and grace to guide your steps. You no longer fear the years ahead. You welcome them, because each one brings deeper peace, truer love, and unshakable authenticity. In the end, the narcissist's envy of youth and beauty reveals the emptiness of their foundation. When the mirror no longer offers admiration, they lose themselves completely. But you, who have walked through their manipulation, who have survived their coldness, are learning to live without illusion. You are learning that real confidence isn't in being adored, but in being aligned with truth. So let their envy go. Let their cold reflection be their lesson, not your burden. Time does not steal from you. It refines you. And as their mask continues to crack under the weight of denial, your soul begins to shine brighter with every honest year you live. Because while the narcissist fights against time, you have learned to move with it, to grow to love, to heal, and to rise into the kind of beauty that no mirror can measure and no envy can destroy. There comes a moment in every narcissist's life when the world stops revolving around them, when people they once controlled begin to live freely, love deeply, and succeed beautifully without their permission. And that is the moment the narcissist begins to crumble inside. You see, control has always been their currency, their power, their sense of identity, their validation. All of it came from being at the center of someone else's world. But when that control slips away, when the people they manipulated finally walk away and start thriving, it's not just their influence that's lost. It's their entire sense of self. For years, they fed on the illusion that others needed them. They believed they were irreplaceable, that their charm or authority kept everyone tethered. But once you heal, once you rebuild, once you smile again without them, they begin to experience a pain they never prepared for. To them, your happiness is a betrayal. Your success is an insult. Your peace is a threat. Because it proves that all along, their control was never real. It was borrowed power dependent on your belief in their dominance. And now that you've broken free, they must face the terrifying truth that they were never as powerful as they thought. Watching you thrive without them stirs something dark in them. A mixture of envy, regret, and rage they can't express without exposing their weakness. They tell themselves you'll fail. They whisper that your joy won't last. They look for signs that you still miss them, still crave their attention. Because deep down, they cannot comprehend a version of reality where you live untouched by their influence. But time keeps proving them wrong. Every step you take forward is a reminder that they no longer have access to your emotions. Every victory you celebrate is proof that their manipulation lost its grip. And so, they begin to rewrite the story. They tell others you've changed, that you're ungrateful, that you were never loyal. It's their desperate attempt to preserve their ego, to create an illusion that still places them in control. But the truth is, they are unraveling. Because control was their addiction. And now they're experiencing withdrawal, without someone to dominate. They are forced to confront the emptiness, they've avoided all their lives. They must face themselves. And that is a mirror they've spent decades running from. You'll notice their bitterness in subtle ways. The way they criticize your joy, the way they minimize your achievements, the way they pretend not to care, but can't stop watching you from a distance. Their words may say they've moved on, but their behavior screams the opposite. Because what they lost wasn't just a relationship, it was their favorite source of power. They are haunted by your freedom, because it represents everything they tried to destroy. Your independence, your confidence, your voice. But here's the truth they can't understand. Your thriving was never about revenge. It was about rebirth. You didn't rise to prove them wrong. You rose because your spirit remembered what it means to be whole. You learned to find strength in silence, to build peace from pain, and to love yourself in ways they never could. You stopped seeking their validation because you realized your worth was never meant to be measured by their approval. That kind of awakening is something the narcissist cannot replicate because it requires humility, a quality they reject to protect their pride. As you move forward, you'll notice how their bitterness only deepens. Every smile you wear, every new opportunity, every genuine relationship you form becomes a silent message that they failed to break you. But rather than celebrating your healing, they interpret it as a personal attack. Because in their world, your joy can't exist without diminishing theirs. They view happiness as competition, not as something everyone deserves. That's why your growth feels like punishment to them. It's the mirror of everything they're not willing to become. And yet, this is where your true healing solidifies. You stop trying to make them understand. You no longer explain, defend, or justify your peace. You learn that their inability to celebrate you has nothing to do with you. It's a reflection of their own decay. The more they cling to bitterness, the more life passes them by. They remain stuck in a loop of resentment while you continue to evolve. The distance between who you were and who you've become becomes your victory. You are living proof that no one's control can outlast the resilience of a healed soul. When you were under their spell, they convinced you that you couldn't survive without them. They made you believe your value came from proximity to their approval. But now, your life is the testimony that love, peace, and purpose don't need their permission to exist. You've stepped into the kind of freedom that frightens them because it exposes their own powerlessness. The irony is that the more they tried to control you, the more they taught you what control looks like. And now you recognize it instantly, reject it immediately, and choose peace intentionally. This is the quiet revenge of healing. Not anger, not retaliation, but thriving. You don't need to announce it or prove it. Your peace speaks louder than their bitterness ever could. You no longer react to their attempts to provoke you because you've outgrown the need to participate in their chaos. You realize that peace is not the absence of conflict. It's the decision to rise above it. In the end, the narcissist's greatest punishment is watching the people they once broke refuse to stay broken. To see those they underestimated become stronger, wiser, and happier without them. That is their undoing. They can no longer manipulate your emotions, rewrite your story, or dictate your worth. You have reclaimed your life, and with that, you've taken away the only thing that ever gave them power. So let them watch. Let them whisper. Let them stew in their own bitterness. Because while they're busy mourning the control they lost, you are busy building a future that doesn't include their shadow. You are walking in peace, grounded in self-worth, and surrounded by love that doesn't require pain to exist. They lost the power to define you the moment you decided to heal. And now, your freedom is the one thing they can never take back. No matter how hard they try, there comes a time in the narcissist's life when the applause stops, the admiration fades, and the audience they worked so hard to manipulate slowly disappears. It's in that silence, when no one is left to praise, to chase, or to control, that they begin to feel the one thing they've spent their whole life running from: emptiness. This isn't the kind of loneliness that visits a healthy person for a season. It's a hollow ache that grows from within, an emotional vacuum created by years of false connections and self-serving love. When admiration runs dry, the narcissist is left with nothing to sustain them, because admiration was never just attention to them. It was oxygen. It was the lifeblood that kept their fragile ego alive. For so long, they believed that being admired meant being loved. They mistook validation for connection, applause for intimacy, control for care. They wore their charm like armor and their arrogance like perfume, convincing everyone around them that they were fulfilled. But behind the mask, there was always a deep hunger, a void that no amount of praise could ever fill. They couldn't give genuine love because they never learned how to receive it. Every compliment was a transaction, every relationship a performance, every act of kindness a calculated move to maintain control. And when the curtain finally falls, when people see through the act, the narcissist is left exposed, empty, and terrified. The haunting begins in small ways. The phone stops ringing. The people they once belittled no longer reach out. Their power to impress, to charm, to dominate begins to lose its effect. They notice that their stories no longer capture the same admiration. Their presence no longer commands the same attention. And suddenly, they are alone with the one person they've avoided all their lives, themselves. That silence, once a weapon they used to punish others, now becomes unbearable, because within it echoes the truth they've spent years denying. They are not the hero of their story. They are the wound that never healed. You see, the narcissist's greatest fear has never been rejection. It's irrelevance. Their entire identity was built on being seen, admired, and envied. When that fades, so does their sense of purpose. They realize that all the people they treated as tools, all the hearts they manipulated, all the love they rejected in their pursuit of control were the very things that could have brought them real fulfillment. But they traded genuine connection for fleeting admiration. And now, in the quiet corners of their mind, they are haunted by everything they destroyed to feed their ego. They replay the memories, not out of regret, but out of disbelief that the world has moved on without them. They can't comprehend how those they once broke have rebuilt. They can't accept that their absence, was not the end of anyone else's life, but perhaps the beginning. That realization eats away at them, because their entire self-worth depended on being needed. But now, the people they once diminished are thriving. Their victims have found peace, love, and purpose beyond the narcissist's reach. And that reality cuts deeper than any revenge could, because it proves that their control was never as powerful as they imagined. The loneliness that follows is not just isolation, it's exposure. Without an audience, the narcissist must confront the void within. But they don't know how to sit with pain, how to reflect, or how to heal. So they scramble for new sources of validation. They may jump from one relationship to another, chasing the next admirer who can refill their ego's tank. They may post more, boast louder, pretend harder. But no matter how much attention they gather, the satisfaction fades faster each time. Because admiration, without authenticity, can't heal emptiness. It only deepens it. Over time, the facade begins to crack. The once confident tone becomes desperate. The charm feels forced. The arrogance turns bitter. They begin to sense that people see through them now. That once powerful illusion of perfection has lost its magic, and they are left with a gnawing fear that they've become irrelevant. They may lash out, blame others, or play the victim. But beneath the chaos lies a soul that is starving for something real. Something they can't manipulate. Something they can't control, unconditional love. But love and control cannot coexist. And because the narcissist refuses to surrender control, they remain trapped in a cycle of self-inflicted loneliness. Every time someone gets too close, their fear of exposure drives them away. Every time someone offers genuine affection, they sabotage it, because intimacy requires vulnerability, and vulnerability feels like weakness. So they keep pretending, keep performing, until the mask becomes too heavy to wear. And in those quiet, sleepless nights, when no one's watching, they are left face to face with the emptiness that admiration could never fill. Meanwhile, the people who once suffered under their manipulation are learning to live again. They are rebuilding their identities, rediscovering joy, reconnecting with God, and finding love that doesn't hurt. Their peace becomes the contrast that highlights the narcissist's inner torment. For the narcissist, it feels like the world has betrayed them. But in truth, the world has simply healed without them. There's a tragic irony in all this. The narcissist could have had everything they ever wanted. They could have been loved, respected, and cherished. But their pride made them choose power over peace, admiration over authenticity, control over connection. And now, as time strips away their illusions, they find themselves surrounded by the consequences of their choices. Relationships built on fear, affection tainted by manipulation, and a life that looks full from the outside, but feels utterly hollow within. This is the final stage of their downfall, emotional starvation. No matter how many people they draw in, no one can sustain the emptiness inside them, because love cannot survive where there is no humility. Admiration cannot replace connection. Control cannot create safety, and power cannot heal a wounded soul. But here's where the lesson turns to light. For you, the survivor, the empath, the one who gave everything. Their emptiness is not your burden to carry. Their loneliness is not your responsibility to soothe. You are not the cure for their void. Your only role now is to protect your peace, to let them face the silence they earned, and to keep walking in your truth. You are the living proof that healing is possible, that life after manipulation is not just survival, it's renewal. Their loneliness is the harvest of the seeds they planted. But your joy, your calm, your restored self-worth, that's the garden you've nurtured through grace and courage. So while they remain haunted by emptiness, you are being filled daily with light, love, and divine purpose. The same silence that torments them now comforts you, because you've learned what they never will. That true peace comes not from being admired, but from being authentic. There comes a moment in every narcissist's life when the mask begins to slip, not because they want it to, but because time itself forces the truth into the light. For years, they've been able to hide behind charm, success, beauty, or influence. They've crafted an image so carefully that even they began to believe it. But age is the one thing they cannot manipulate. It's the great equalizer, the quiet revealer of what was always hidden beneath the surface. And as the years pass, what once looked like confidence starts to look like insecurity. What once seemed powerful begins to crumble under the weight of its own emptiness. You see, the narcissist has spent a lifetime constructing an identity around how others see them. Their worth was never rooted in truth. It was always borrowed from perception. They measured their value by the admiration of others, by the way people responded to their beauty, their intelligence, or their control. But time changes everything. The applause fades. The faces that once adored them move on. Their reflection begins to change, and with it, their sense of self begins to fracture. The aging process, something most people embrace as a natural part of growth, becomes for the narcissist a daily reminder that their control over perception is slipping away. When the narcissist was younger, they could manipulate with ease. They knew how to draw attention, how to play the role of the victim, the hero, or the irresistible one, whichever the situation required. But as the years pass, those tactics lose their power. People begin to see patterns. They begin to recognize the manipulation for what it is. The charm that once captivated now feels forced. The arrogance that once seemed confident now feels desperate. The narcissist feels the shift, even if they don't admit it. And that realization, that they are no longer fooling everyone, begins to consume them from within. The insecurities that were always there, the fear of rejection, of being unimportant, of being unloved, start to rise to the surface. They no longer have the same external validation to drown those fears out. The beauty fades, the accolades slow down, the influence weakens. Suddenly, the narcissist is face to face with themselves, the real self they've avoided their entire life. And it's not a pretty sight. Because behind the grandiosity, there has always been a deep wound, a belief that they are unworthy of love unless they are admired, that they are nothing without attention, that if people saw the truth of who they are, they would walk away. And that's the truth the years reveal. People do start to walk away. The constant drama, the manipulation, the control, It becomes too exhausting to maintain. The friends who once tolerated them drift off. The partners who once believed the lies learn to set boundaries. The narcissist begins to lose their audience. And with that loss comes panic. They may lash out more, blame others more intensely, or play the victim louder than ever, trying to recapture the sympathy and admiration they once commanded. But the more they fight to hold on, the more transparent their behavior becomes. They start to expose themselves without even realizing it. This exposure isn't always public. It often happens privately, in the quiet moments of life when there's no one left to impress. The narcissist looks in the mirror and no longer sees power, they see fear. They no longer see beauty. They see the passing of time. They no longer see control. They see the reality that everyone eventually outgrows manipulation. What terrifies them most is not aging itself, but what aging reveals that their entire identity was built on things that do not last. Their value was never in who they are, but in how they appeared. And now that appearance is fading, their identity begins to collapse. They start comparing themselves to others, their children, younger colleagues, old rivals, and the jealousy intensifies. They can't stand to see others thriving while they feel forgotten. They criticize more harshly. They gossip more viciously. They cling more tightly to anyone still willing to give them attention. But these behaviors only push people further away, deepening their isolation. And it's in that isolation that the final exposure truly happens. Because in isolation, the narcissist can no longer hide behind anyone else's energy. There's no one left to manipulate, no one left to blame, no one left to mirror their false image back to them. It's just them and their truth. The truth they've avoided for decades. And the truth is that beneath the arrogance was always insecurity. Beneath the superiority was always fear. Beneath the control was always chaos. The narcissist built their life trying to protect that wounded part of themselves from ever being seen. But time has a way of peeling back every layer of pretense. Their patterns catch up to them. Their relationships collapse. Their reputation shifts from admiration to avoidance. And slowly, the world around them reflects back what was always inside them: emptiness, bitterness, and unhealed pain. The final exposure isn't punishment, it's revelation. It's the moment when everything they projected outward finally turns inward. They begin to feel what they made others feel. The loneliness, the rejection, the invalidation. But because they've never learned to self-reflect or take accountability, they don't know how to transform that pain into growth. Instead, they spiral, grasping for control that no longer exists. Their words lose power. Their manipulation loses effect. Their influence fades. And the more they realize they are losing relevance, the more desperate they become to prove otherwise. But here's where the beauty lies. Not in their unraveling, but in the clarity it brings for everyone who was once entangled with them. The exposure of the narcissist through age is not just their unveiling. It's your liberation. Because the truth they can no longer hide behind finally confirms what you always knew deep down, that their cruelty came from fear, not power. Their control came from weakness, not strength. The person who once made you question your worth is now struggling to find their own. Time has done what justice, confrontation, or reason could not. It has revealed what was real and what was never true. The narcissist may try to rebuild their image again, but it never quite works. People see through the performance now. The charm feels hollow, the words ring empty, and the mask no longer fits. This is the final exposure, the point where the illusion shatters completely. And though they may try to cover it up with denial or distraction, their soul knows the truth. They are not the admired figure they once pretended to be. They are the frightened child who never healed, living in the shell of an adult who spent a lifetime pretending to be invincible. But while the narcissist declines in their illusion, those who survive their manipulation rise. The truth sets them free. The final exposure becomes a lesson in divine justice, a reminder that time itself fights for truth, that masks, no matter how beautifully crafted, always crumble under the weight of reality, and that nothing built on deceit can stand forever. So when you look back on what you endured, know this: the exposure of the narcissist is not your revenge. It's your validation. You don't need to see their downfall to know you've already won. Because where they are aging in bitterness, you are maturing in wisdom. Where they are unraveling in insecurity, you are rising in peace. Their truth is their undoing, but yours is your freedom. And that is the ultimate revelation that time brings to every soul who walks through pain and chooses healing over pride. And so, as the final veil of illusion falls, what remains is truth, pure, undeniable truth. The narcissist who once lived for attention now faces silence, and in that silence, the emptiness echoes louder than applause ever did. Time has exposed what manipulation once concealed, the fragile heart behind the grand performance. No more hiding behind charm, no more feeding off validation, no more pretending to be untouchable. Age has stripped away the glitter, leaving only the raw reflection of who they truly are. But for those who endured their storm, this exposure brings peace. You no longer need to prove what you saw, because life itself has revealed it. The truth stands on its own now. Their downfall is not your celebration. It is your closure. You are free from the illusion, free from the need to explain, free from the cycle of confusion. While they are caught in the shadows of their own making, you are standing in the light of your growth. Time has done what justice could not. It has equalized, healed, and revealed. And as the narcissist fades into the noise of their own undoing, you rise with quiet strength, proof that truth and integrity always outlast deceit and pretense.